Recording now. Um, Hi, this is Thomas Brown with SAN, ESSN. We're here with Thomas Hiru, Hiura. Is that correct?
Yeah, Hiura.
Hira. Okay. Um, yeah, Thomas is running for Eugene mayor, and um, it, he wants we wanted to give all the candidates a chance to get their word out, get to introduce themselves to all their constituents, and make a more level playing field for this election. Um, SAN and ESSN do not endorse any candidates. We're just making this platform available to any that want it. So how are you tonight,
Well,
Thomas?
I'm doing really well, and I am so grateful that you're providing this because, we're all being asked to take on what we can in unique ways during this crisis. And some organizations like, Solidarity Action Network have really stepped up and gone into a territory that may not be the most comfortable for you to do all these video conferencing interviews with all the candidates. But I can tell you that I really appreciate it, and people who want to see a robust, people-powered democratic process in the community really appreciate it also. So thank you, Thomas.
You bet. Yeah, it's been a learning curve for us, but uh, we're actually jazzed up about it. We're looking forward to doing more, not necessarily campaign interviews and such, but public service type of thing. With different
Totally.
speakers on different issues and stuff. So, would you like to make a 3 or 4 minute opening statement as to why people should vote for you?
It would be a pleasure to do that. Thank you. I'm Thomas Hiura. I use any and all gender pronouns, and I've been running this campaign for 8 months because I grew up here and I'm deeply concerned for the future of our community. I have 7 years of policy experience with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, the Carleton College Student Senate, where I successfully fought for student health care access and anti-bullying efforts, and the highest non-academic governing body of the college, where I was a college council member, approving designs for multi-million-dollar buildings such as a science complex and a performance hall. I'm deeply practiced in the academic and practical study of leadership, having worked for the Leadership Enterprise for a Diverse America summer program multiple times on the Princeton University campus. I was a college guidance coordinator, and I was the first in my position to have a 100% success rate, in that 50 out of my 50 students all earned admission to one of Barron's most competitive colleges and universities. I'm a serious workhorse, and I've also been a head counselor in multiple iterations of District 5110's Rotary Youth Leadership Award Camp, where rising 11th graders study leadership, philosophy, and practice. I would take office at 27 years old, and luckily I have a long history of succeeding in leadership roles that are typically earmarked for people 2 or sometimes 3 times my age. I was made a co-chair of Carleton's Bias Incident Response Team Committee, and I worked directly with the Vice President for Student Life as the coordinator of a campus community-wide conversations project, where we brought issues of significant relevance, such as income inequality, the Black Lives Matter movement, Islamophobia, into direct conversation and had dialogue in the dorm halls, not only with students, but also with faculty members, professors, administrators, and non-faculty staff. So I really like to bridge people together, and I think I'm somebody who can take a situation where a lot of people feel like Eugene is a little bit leaderless, and really put a face on what it means to build dialogue, build inclusion, and actually live up to the practices that we often talk about wanting to get done. I'm the right candidate to bring all Eugenians into the conversation, including youth. So I make no apology for my contributions to the hip hop community. As Gradient, I have gone on 2 national tours, recorded 3 albums, and KVAL News named me an everyday hero, in part because of the record-breaking blood drive attendance that I was able to help promote with the blood drive rap in Northern Eugene. I've studied hip hop pedagogy at the graduate level at Columbia University, and applied my knowledge both in the classroom and in this candidate forum right now. So here's a little rap called My Opening Statement. My opening statement: I've got hope for replacement. We need us a leader who's leading. I mean it. Let's vote. We can change this. Because I know there's a way, just Listen close when I say this. My resume shows I'm prepared for the moment, ain't scared of opponents, ain't scared to be sticking to the truth when I'm speaking to the youth, and I got a big platform. Eyes on the prize. Leaders don't tell lies all the time, bad form. Then they come back 4 years later and find out it was bad for them. When you cut the public voice from your meetings, you've created a bad forum. On the other hand, I'd increase transparency that I'd manage. Daily news magazines for the youth on the gram, it's dynamic. Weekly uncut podcasts that have been a part of my planning. I know she's taking big donor money from the realtors, and I haven't. Every one of the policies that I passed had transparency. She just said that she kept her promise for weekly blogs. That's embarrassing. If you care to see, she wrote 50% of them. That's what the mayor has made. I taught high school government, where that is a failing grade. So we need to elect someone with a strong record of competence and leadership in government, and I'm proud to say that I'm that candidate.
Well, thank you. That's our first rap.
Really? I would
Yeah.
expect all of the candidates to bust a freestyle or something
Yeah.
at least.
So we'll start off with some questions. It doesn't take a crystal ball to see that the current recession will exacerbate Eugene's affordable housing crisis and force yet more residents onto the streets. How will you respond to the immediate spike in homelessness and the housing instability? And what measures will you take over the longer term to help Eugene's unhoused?
Wow, what an important question. And it's something that I will, from the rip, always say that housing and homelessness are the top issues that the city of Eugene needs to be focused on. I believe climate change is up there, but I don't think that climate change is the number one issue when we look at what's really happening on the day-to-day level in our streets and in our communities. One of the things is that I've been an advocate of emergency preparedness. I've been running this campaign since August. And so in November, I was calling for an emergency fund in case of an economic disaster that would help with small business loans. That's not directly tied to housing, but it's related to the crisis. And now we have to be a little more reactive rather than proactive in our decision making. But though I've been a really staunch critic of some of the leadership of the last 4 years and really of my whole upbringing in Eugene, this is an issue where I would want to continue and work with a lot of the policies that have been put in place. There has been a lot of collaboration over the last few years between the county and the city. And I believe in what Sarai Johnson is doing in her new position, making that collaboration happen fluidly. But really, gosh, in terms of the emergency situation, there have been shelters that Whitebird and Carry It Forward have been operating at Hilliard and at the fairgrounds. And I want to make those well promoted, especially across generations. One of the biggest features of my candidacy, which is very in-depth in terms of policy, I have 64 policy proposals on my website, is that I believe in communicating to groups of Eugenians who are typically left out of the process, you know, something like what I think your organization is doing right now. And so, for example, there have been a lot of positive resources that are on the website for COVID-19 response and these shelters that have gone up. But if you don't have access to the internet or you're not familiar with the City of Eugene website, which is a little convoluted and hard to navigate at times, you might not be aware of what those things are. So I am communicating broadly. I'm communicating in person, not as much now because we're all stuck at home, but through social media, through podcasts, and in many ways, I feel like the race has sort of come into my domain. If people care to look at the long-form conversations I've had with community leaders and creative leaders, check out my podcast, Less Stupid with Thomas Hiura, everywhere podcasts stream, and YouTube, because, you know, for example, I've had even fellow candidates, Matthew Uke, who has lots of great ideas on housing, Robert Patterson, who ran really as a feature of his campaign was housing. But let me just rattle off a couple of the long-term things because we've talked about the crisis issues. Accessory dwelling units are a property right. I believe that people who own property and you know, operate property have the right not to then tell what their next door neighbors can do on their property if it's not doing anybody harm. So I believe in allowing people to set up more accessory dwelling units. And the city of Eugene has a lot of sway in terms of building legality around solutions that make sense. And housing is certainly something that we need to recognize. It needs to be treated with the kind of urgency. For example, the incumbent mayor, sort of talks about 75. One of the things I love about Zondi Zenke, who's become a friend of mine in this race, is that she calls out very directly what's going on in the mayoral office. And I'll borrow that strategy for a second and say that, a lot of the accomplishments that are noted in the voter pamphlet under the mayor's platform are things that actually haven't happened yet, things that are phrased as though they've happened. And one of them is the 500 units of housing that are going to go up on the riverfront properties. Only 75 of those are earmarked as needing to be affordable. And even the definitions surrounding what is affordable housing are not necessarily accurate for a lot of everyday people. So we need to really make serious investments. And in terms of just enacting a broad vision, right? I believe in taller housing in the city center. I believe in housing units along transportation corridors with shared walls that are more efficient and ideally would be LEED certified, and that have businesses on the bottom level. So I went from Eugene, Oregon, where I grew up, I went to grad school at Columbia in New York City, where they have density down to a T, and we can emulate some of the things that other cities have done well. And one of the biggest things that we face, frankly, with housing is NIMBYism. People believe, it's NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. People believe rhetorically in these things that we can do, but they don't always put their money where their mouth is. So, we'll still be able to see Spencer Butte and Skinner's Butte if we're able to build taller and more efficient structures that allow for walkable neighborhoods. And those are a bunch of the things that I am on board with.
Thank you. Eugene has one of the worst affordable housing shortages in the whole country. How do you feel about high rises and sprawl versus sprawl? Which do you support? If we have to increase our housing, it's going to have to be one or the other, more densely packed or higher.
Well, this is a bit related to NIMBYism. Like I said, people in Eugene historically, they don't like density, but they also don't like sprawl. And but they like people, and I certainly like having people to be able to have housing. So I'm more on the side of density, right? So I could see some changes being made to the urban growth boundary, but not significant ones. It's one that's pretty that is defined intelligently as it is, and I don't believe in making more trouble in the wetlands and in West Eugene, which is where a lot of those such developments would probably want to go if we increase sprawl. Sprawl is also not a very ecologically sound solution because it increases carbon emissions through transportation. So it's absolutely true that affordable housing needs to be the biggest priority. And I would build on a lot of the work that's being done so far. But again, I believe in taller housing, and it's going to bring vibrance to the downtown area that has been continually improved, but has also faced some enduring issues, let's say. So that's where I stand on that.
So affordable housing or low income housing. And a lot of people don't, think those are interchangeable, but they aren't. I mean, affordable is a relative term.
Yes.
So the need to incentivize affordable housing development can place landowners, developers, affordable housing activists, and labor groups at odds. How will you manage the conflict between the 1% and the rest of the community?
I think that's a really interesting question and something we're going to have to work really hard at. I come from a very working class background, and I will always remember what my roots were and are. So I went to North Eugene High School. I went to Eugene Gakuen and Kelly Middle School. So I grew up in the North Eugene area, where we always felt a little divorced in the River Road community from a lot of the investments that have gone on. But really, I think that one of the things that is so important is being able to lead conversations, as I have in my life, between disparate groups and groups that have different interests, and try to build common solutions. The weak mayor system that we have is not one where I'm going to have the de jure power to hire a bunch of city staff and, stick it to the 1% or stick it to any particular group. It's going to be a lot of being an effective figurehead for where the city is moving. And really bringing to light a lot of the issues that I have the power to speak on to the public. I spoke recently to Kitty Piercy, who was my most recent guest on my show, and we talked for 70 minutes. It was great. She had a lot of great insights, and I did a lot more listening than I'm doing now because I'm talking because I'm running for office. But she basically was saying that you don't have a gavel, but you do have tools, and you have the ability to be a positive communicator, be a strong public speaker, which I believe that I am. I would have loved to have these debates and these forums in person because I really get excited speaking in front of people. But I say all that to say that there's an unfortunate vitriol that can define the relationships between, I would say, in really broad terms, the business community and activists for the unhoused community. And I don't believe in that dichotomy. I don't believe that everybody who employs people is exploitative, and I don't believe the negative stereotypes that play out about unhoused people, especially because my unhoused people have been in my direct family since 2011, and I have deep love and appreciation for what everybody contributes. So we're just going to need to speak up and speak our minds truthfully, and bring everybody towards these solutions. And they're not going to happen with the kind of immediacy that I want. But, it's kind of like when Obama came in and had to clean up 8 years of fiscal disaster and terrible foreign policy and 2 unnecessary wars. I'm not going to be able to come into the city of Eugene's entrenched issues and clean up everything with the pace that I sure wish as a Eugenian that we could. But I'm going to work my damn butt off for it. And that's my promise to you.
I didn't realize you had a podcast. Is that what it is?
That's correct. All the episodes are on video, so it's on YouTube, but also on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Less Stupid with Thomas Hiura. It's been a ton of fun. Very discussion-based, because I like the very produced podcasts, like the New York Times podcast and the NPR Politics podcast, but I also like the really just sort of long-form, uncensored conversations and unfiltered conversations. You can tell I'm loquacious and I like to talk and I like to have conversations. So I think that, people might not look at me and think that I'm the typical mold for a mayor, but I certainly bring a lot of skills that I practice all the time. And once I get into office, it's not as though I'm going to stop practicing those. So yeah, podcasting is something I believe in. Joe Biden's got a podcast now. Hillary Clinton made a podcast before she lost in 2016. Those are 2 maybe examples I shouldn't immediately highlight, but all I'm saying is the world is coming to the new media digital world. And so I'm glad to have been a little ahead of the curve on that.
Sure. So how do you feel about the panhandling ban that they tried to push through? It wasn't successful, but do you believe there should be a ban on panhandling, or is that a step too far?
I think the council spoke on that. I think that's a pretty settled issue at this point, in that Oregon has a very special constitution that allows people to occupy public space. It allows people to be in the public, and the most in need and most desperate members of our community are not the people that I want to criminalize. But again, I like to see all issues from both sides. And I think that Springfield was able to pass a no panhandling ordinance, and I would be in dialogue with Mayor Lundberg or Mayor Eister about the positives and negatives about how that has that implementation has looked on the ground. But the kinds of behaviors that can be destructive on our streets are what I would want to focus on having consequences for, more than, hey, do you guys have 10 cents? I'm in need of 10 cents. That's not a criminal, you know. That's 9 times out of 10, that's somebody who, I mean, I've had delightful conversations with people downtown, but all throughout the city, who have been travelers or people who are experiencing houselessness or homelessness. And I am not anti those people, but I'm certainly strong in my public safety views, and we can have a nuanced dialogue that achieves the goal of everybody feeling safe. Because, you know, if we're going to talk about what's happening on our streets, we have to be real about the fact that women, children, a lot of Eugenians don't feel safe walking around, not even in the evenings, the late evenings, but throughout the day in parts of our community. So we need to address that as well.
Yeah. So the last June, the city council voted to implement a payroll tax in Eugene. They also decided not to refer it to the controversial tax to the voters. What is your stance on payroll taxes, and do you agree with the council's decision not to allow voters to weigh in on the tax?
That's such a passionate issue. I'm going to turn off my background and just level with you. I don't think that there's anybody running for mayor besides the incumbent who believes that the payroll tax was handled appropriately. And so okay, you know, as a teacher, which I was, you try to be positive as you're being constructive. So here's a positive that came from that payroll tax. They decided that they wouldn't be able to increase the rate at which people are taxed without a vote. But it sure would have been nice if people had just been able to vote on it in the first place. It's a regressive tax in that it taxes workers, and, you know, the big sort of gotcha from the establishment camp is, well, the minimum wage workers are exempt from it, so they're not getting taxed. But someone making $15 an hour, which is hardly a vibrant living wage, is still getting taxed. And so that's something that there were so many last minute changes that were being made to it. It was a prime example of leadership being both out of touch and incompetent, which is hopefully not what I will be as mayor. And I have deep concerns with the payroll tax and how that went down.
Yeah, we're SAN is trying to get a petition going. This COVID thing just slammed it, you know, slammed the door on it. But
right,
we want to get it on the ballot. You know, we're not necessarily pro or con, you know, but the people should vote. You know, we should be able to vote on it.
right. Yeah, I shouted you guys out in a Register Guard questionnaire about the fact that you guys were trying to get people to be able to vote on it. Because, I mean, if you want accountability for where our hard-earned dollars are going, I mean, the surveying that went out did not show that, you know, the lion's share should go towards public safety and going towards the same public safety actors who basically Cahoots needs more money, man. That's Cahoots is widely beloved and seen as an envy of other cities that look at our community and see that we have a really great buffer between you know, Eugene's finest, the police force, who do work that I'm not going to say is unimportant. There is important work being done, but that, you know, for example, if you're intervening in a mental health crisis and somebody is, let's say, experiencing delusions, and they're not necessarily a violent person, but they you know, are drugged out and they're on the street, bringing in the police and multiple police members into that situation is often going to cause that situation to escalate. And that could be an example or a result of, you know, I see things from all sides. There's bias that police officers experience, but because that is experienced, it can be really helpful to have people like, Chelsea Swift has spoken out a lot. She doesn't represent cahoots, crisis assistance helping out on the streets, when she speaks on this issue, but she's been a really strong advocate for having them receive at least as much money that's proportionate to how many calls they respond to, because they are listening to the police radio, and they have they are responding to a lot of the work, but they're not getting the resources they need. I'll speak from public safety from the business perspective too. I was a bellhop at Graduate Eugene until everybody just got laid off because the hospitality industry basically went under in the whole nation, right? And that was one of the things that I was doing, and I really enjoyed it because I felt like a bit of an ambassador to Eugene in a way, like a good prep for running for office. But when there's real emergencies and there are limitations of private security, we can't get through to these people. The cahoots can't respond to a call. EPD can't respond to a call unless it, is deemed like, super high priority, because they basically, they're because that's not the status quo. That's not how it's been able to happen. And so, it's just, there is a need for better public safety and a more holistic approach to public safety in the community. And the payroll tax was not it, because it did not reflect the will of the people, and it actually kind of inverted their preferences in terms of how they wanted that money to be spent. And I'm not like opposed to all taxes across the board, but if the government's going to take our money, we should have some say in what the hell it's doing. I think that's pretty common sense.
All right. Just quickly, let's see where. What does self-governance mean to you? Do you believe elected representatives have a role to play in facilitating self-governance models within our communities? If so, how have you, and how do you plan on to do that work as mayor?
And that's a really interesting point. I'm not a parent, but I feel like when I'm a parent, it'll be a really powerful experience to show my kid what they've inherited in terms of government structure, right? And I say that because we have such deep levels of government in this country. We have the federal government. The UN has a couple of things that are mostly non-binding, but we're in the Security Council there. We have our county government. We have our state government. And for people who live in incorporated areas, you have your city government as well. And all those things arose out of historical circumstances that were both good and bad. I was a history teacher, so it's really hard to paint with a broad brush about, the Oregon Constitution's establishment in 1859 was really positive. And it's like, no, they also banned African Americans from even living in the state. So that's the only state to have done that. Everything's complicated. And self-governance is a complicated issue as well, because there is a genuine need for, there's certain things that only I think the government can take care of. And like, for example, environmental policies and regulations are something that, we can see progress happening in the business sector, but it's not very tied to their incentives in a strongly capitalist system. So government has to be able to say, no, you guys can't pollute this much, blah, blah, blah. So that there's a fair playing field that everybody can participate in. So my understanding of self-governance is something is basically that, people will be able to define the terms of their own communities a little bit more. And so the spirit of that, I think, for me is in line with my platform, because I want to make Eugene a more democratic place. I want to increase opportunities for public speaking and for public dialogue. I want to continue to do those things. And that's why I think people who want to practice self-governance will find a lot to appreciate in my platform, especially if you check out Hiura2020.org. And look at the cultural climate section of my 8-part policy plans. There's a lot of cool stuff in there.
Thank you. So finally, what is your vision for the city? And as an elected representative, what role will you play in bringing that vision to reality?
I am so proud to be a Eugenian, and I'm proud to say that there's a lot of people in this race who didn't grow up here, and they don't know what it's like, that Eugene has changed so much, and so I'm a rare candidate who wants to be here, living in the city in the 2070s, and so I have a strong vision for Eugene. One is carbon neutrality. So 50% by 2030 is not going to cut it. I drive an electric vehicle, and I would be the first Eugene mayor to drive a fully electric car. And I believe in having a planet that is inhabitable. I believe in density and having vibrant communities where artists will continue to enjoy coming through Eugene because it's a stop between Portland and San Francisco that can allow them to still make money and do their shows and contribute to our community a lot. This is a visionary thing, is something I don't talk about in a lot of spaces, but I feel like this is a pretty good space to talk about it, is the City of Eugene Creative Giant Award. So the mayor has a lot of ceremonial duties, and one thing I would want to do is honor people who are creative giants in the global community, but who have love for Eugene. So I'm thinking of hip hop artists. I'm thinking of Bob Dylan. I'm thinking of people who I want to be able to give them an award and say, Eugene really appreciates you. You guys have helped inform the spirit of the community, and hopefully have a lot of people be able to come and receive the award in person at a free event that's open to the public. I believe in the 8 pillars of my platform, which are established when I think about things that the government hasn't been able to handle all that well. So they are education, mental health, business, housing, climate, art, history, and climate again. And I have I recognize the limitation of me just rattling off all those policy points right now. I think it's more fun if people check out the website and see about the vision that I have. But we are going to keep what is great about this community while also doing more for making it easier for small businesses and creative people to make money and make a living in our community, and continue to not have to leave the city. Make it so that business and investors want to come to Eugene and start their coffee shops and their restaurants and their craft stores, and really contribute here, instead of the status quo where Cornucopia just went to Springfield and we're losing businesses left and right. So I believe in a sense of unity, which is why my slogan is everyone working together. And it's been a real pleasure, Thomas. Thank you for allowing me to. Ta-da! Here's the graphic again. Yeah. Thanks for allowing me to lay out some of my ideas here, and for everything that you're doing with the organization.
It is a pleasure, and you're the final one in our quest to make people aware of that there's more than just the incumbents running.
Thank you.
So I see on your logo there you have your website address. Is that how people can get a hold of you if they want to? Is there a way for them to contact you?
Yep. Hiura2020.org/contact. But so there's a form there, but people can also call me, text me. My phone number is 541-510-9987. Put me in your phone. I'm a communicator, so I'm happy to answer any kind of individual questions that people have. And even if you don't think that vote your heart. That's all I'm saying in this mayoral race. Don't let the previous notions about what has led to positive mayoral leadership in our community inform your vote. I'm a 27-year-old gender non-binary weirdo, neurodivergent, half Asian person who just happens to have a crap load of credibility in leadership and government. And I think I would be an excellent choice for mayor. But if we want to just continue to reelect the same kind of people, we're going to keep getting the same slow glacial pace results. So especially in the primary, where we are guaranteed by the 6-figure donor money that Lucy Venus has, she'll be on your November ballot almost certainly. It'd be really surprising if me or Zondi or Matthew is able to, or anybody is able to get more than 50% of the vote in May and seal the deal then. So vote your heart in the primary. And Lucy will be on your ballot, and you'll have much more time to assess from now until November who you really want to vote for in the general. And we should have a choice. So I believe strongly in that, and I'm ready to support any one of the candidates if it ends up that the challenger in November is not me, because I believe strongly in real change, and that if you don't have a record that's worth reelecting, you just can't buy your way into the seat. You can't, no amount of ad dollars is going to transform a record that has not performed into something that's worth seeing, represented for another 4 years. So I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm vibrant. I'm annoying, and I would continue to annoy all the right people as mayor, while also doing it all in good fun. So thank you, Thomas.
All right. So I'm Thomas Brown with SAN and ESSN. That's Solidarity Action Network and Eugene Springfield Solidarity Network. And as I said at the beginning, we're not endorsing any candidates, but we're making the platform available for all the non-incumbent candidates to get their word out and let people know who they are and what they stand for. And thank you, Thomas. I'm going to end the recording now.